Okay. Thank you for being here, everyone. Welcome to the annual STC Florida Employment Panel. My name is Bethany Aguad. I am the president of the STC Florida chapter, and I'm glad to be here to kind of facilitate today's meeting. Just to go over our agenda real quickly. Thank you for everyone who was on for our networking time from 6:30 to 7. I always enjoy getting to chit chat with folks and hear about jobs, cats, shared history, and looking forward to continuing on with the rest of the presentations. So from this point on, I just think anything, if you have any questions that come along while our panelists are speaking, if you can put them in the chat, that way I can make sure to gather them all and ask them directly, at least during the moderated Q&A. If we get to the point where it's open Q&A and we have time for more questions, I'll let you guys know if you want to speak and ask a question verbally. I did mention for those who were joining earlier about some job opportunities. Those details are in the chat, and I will also send them out because I know we have folks who are looking for work or looking, I'll say, at work, when you want to know what else is out there, even if you're not actively looking. So these are from different STC contexts and other chapters and communities. So I put those in there, but if anyone's interested or looking for anything further, feel free to let me know. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. I think my other officer that's on here is WC Weiss. I'll let him just give, you don't have to give a speech, WC, but WC is our treasurer.
Yeah. I welcome all of you who paid to attend tonight's meeting.
And for the students who came for free. You're doing great. And otherwise, let me go on to the next slide. All right, before we get into introducing our panelists, I did want to talk about just some general opportunities from the STC Florida chapter since we're hosting today. Our next meeting is going to be on May 26th. That's going to be myself and Nick Ducharme, and we're doing a presentation on Tech Comm and mental health. The exact title, TBD, but looking forward to offering that following the summit, because I know we have folks here who will be attending the summit, which is May 15th through 18th. If anyone is going to the summit, feel free to put that in the chat because it's always a good opportunity to see who else is going if you get a chance to cross paths. I know John has his contingent who is going, including Anne-Marie. So anyone else who might be there, feel free to share. If you are, been coming to our meetings and are not yet a member, I encourage you to join, going to stc.org or let me know in the chat and I'm happy to work with you on that. I know a lot of faces here I recognize as our current chapter members, but I just wanted to mention that. And if you're a student or if you're transitioning or you're just looking to, build out your experience, we are always looking for volunteers for the chapter. Basically, tell me what you want to learn or let me help you figure out what you want to learn because we've always got different things that can be done, whether that's working on the chapter website or volunteering on the administrative council, managing different projects. I cannot even begin to quantify how much I've learned from being in the STC Florida chapter. It's such a part of my life and my experience that I'm very grateful to have had it, and I'm happy to share that with other people. Julia Southwick is not on the call today, but she is our newsletter editor. So I always make sure to put a plug in here. If you are looking to get something published, we are happy to put anything Tech Comm related onto our blog, which also is our chapter newsletter that goes out by email. Julia is a kind, gentle, and understanding editor who is happy to work with you on timing, length, deadlines, and editing in general. So if that's something you would like to do, if you're looking to have something added to your portfolio, feel free to reach out to her at the newsletter email address. Without further ado, we have our panelists today. Give me a moment while I'm trying to spotlight their videos on Zoom. I believe I can spotlight 3 videos, so let me make sure I'm doing that correctly. Zoom likes to throw me for a loop by changing features sometimes. All right, is everyone seeing our 3 panelists on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yes. All right, so today we've got Wendy Hurst, Christensen, and Patrick Green. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves briefly, and then I've got some prepared questions that they've gotten to see ahead to give them a chance to answer and get kind of the ball rolling. And then after that, time permitting, we'll have some open Q&A. So if you think of a question along the way, like I said, put it in the chat. Or if you have something you want to add, please put it in the chat. So, that's a great thing for people to see any shared experience or anything else you might want to add yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. Panelists, don't worry, I will call on you by name and not just look at you on the screen because that's not necessarily the most helpful way to cue you. So, Wendy, if you don't mind going first, your name, location, your current company and role, and a little bit of your experience in the field.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here this evening. So, my name is Wendy Hurst, and I live and work in South Bend, Indiana. And I work for a company called Sagent, and we provide software to the mortgage industry. So, in our company, we have a handful of products for lenders, including loan servicing software, um, software solutions that focus on defaulted loans and that kind of thing. So it's certainly ever changing, an environment where we're always upgrading our systems. So kind of a interesting spot to be. And I've been working in technical writing for about 30 years or so, and have just really been excited to do so many different parts of the process, not just writing, but also presenting information, determining, how best to store content, how best to present it. We've developed a website where we publish information. We've recently taken on a lot more work with Madcap Flair to manage our content and provide more user-friendly displays. So it's just been a lot of growth and change, and just kind of exciting to see things evolve and improve over the years. So just not standing still. Technical writing is ever changing, so it's been a lot of good experience.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Christine, you mind going next? I'll give you a minute to unmute yourself.
Sure. Yeah, the first time I clicked it didn't unmute. I don't know why.
All the time.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Christensen. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I am the documentation manager for Cityworks, which is a software company. Our software is used by local governments and cities and counties to manage all of their infrastructure. So they've got roads, water lines, power lines, parks, fleet, and they've got to keep track of all of their maintenance on that. So that's what our software is for. I started here 11 years ago as a technical writer and was able to move into the manager position about 7 years ago. I've got a team of 8 technical writers. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Christine. All right, Patrick, you mind tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Patrick Green. I currently live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I work for Lockheed Martin out of Orlando, Florida, at the Rotary Missions and Training site over on Lake Underhill. I've been with Lockheed for about 21 years. Prior to that, I was in the Marine Corps for 20 years. So combined with those, I think I have probably about 35 years of technical manual experience, whether it's using the 2,000-page manual set to maintain the radar and operate the radar that's in the picture behind me, or working at Lockheed. I wrote for a brief period, and then I've been in my current position of a manager of about 20 people, where we write manuals to operate and maintain all the trainers that come out of our site. And then we're part of a bigger team of about 140 writers across the eastern seaboard. And I currently have 12 Lockheed people, 6 contractors, and 2 interns from UCF on my team. So.
Well, great. Thank you, Patrick. So I know we have some folks here who are looking for work, as I mentioned earlier. I did want to put out there if any of our panelists currently hiring or might be hiring in the near future that you'd like to mention to people.
Not me.
Not at the moment.
No, not at the moment. Sorry.
We do have an opening on our team, but we are kind of a little further along right now in the interview process. So we're hoping that perhaps later in the year we'll get some more openings. So I'll certainly share that if we are lucky enough to have some more openings.
All right, thanks, Wendy.
I do not have any open positions right now, but I'm hoping to have one in the near future. I'm working on it.
Oh, exciting. What level would you be possibly hiring?
Entry level to mid level experience.
Okay, great. Well, we will stay tuned then on possibilities for the future. You never know where the next opportunity might lead.
Yeah.
So for the moderated questions, my first one is about really what recommendations do you have for a job search strategy? Like how should people approach looking for a job? I will say Laurie Corbett was saying networking, talk to everyone. You never know who's going to give you a job. But I was curious, any of our panelists, if you have a particular recommendation that you think people should use when approaching hunting for a job.
Well, I think LinkedIn is a good option.
Mhm.
So I don't know if any of the students or people starting out have been very active on LinkedIn, but I think that's a good way to hear about openings and find out information. So I know our company posts information that way to promote our company and our job openings. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, if there are any students or people who are new or looking to spruce up your LinkedIn, just do what John Clement does. He is, I will say, a relentless LinkedIn poster. Shout out to John's LinkedIn, keeping me up to date on everything that's going on. John has responded with a smiley face. Don't worry, it's all good fun. Christine, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think it helps. So this was mentioned earlier during the networking session, but Tech Comm is a big world. There's software documentation, medical writing, military, like we've seen with Patrick's experience. Like it's a broad field. And I know that it's hard because sometimes, especially when you're like new to the field, you just want a job. But if you can kind of think like, where do you want to end up? Is there a particular area that is of interest to you? That can really help you narrow down your search so that you can target, like, say, software documentation if that's where you want to end up.
Yeah. Do you have recommendations for how people who haven't worked in the field yet might sort of refine their interests?
Networking is a good way to meet people. STC is such a friendly place. There's a Slack channel for STC, and I've seen people post and they're like, I'm interested in this. And there will be so many people that will say, I do that. I'd be happy to chat with you. And I've actually connected with some students that have posted and been able to talk with them. So I think finding somebody, an STC is a good way to do that, but find someone who's doing, maybe you want to look into medical writing, find someone who's doing that and just say, hey, can we chat for 30 minutes and I can pick your brain on what you're doing. And that could help you figure out, is that really the right fit for you?
I am putting a link in the chat for how to join that STC Slack that Christine mentioned. It is a great place to connect with people from other communities and other parts of the country. That's been an upside of us all being so remotely connected, is being able to get in touch with folks who have all sorts of unique perspectives. So Patrick, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I would just echo what Wendy and Christine said. The networking is probably the biggest thing. All of my recent contractors and employees have come directly from UCF through networking with the professors there. When we have positions, we reach out to the professors and they let the current or just recently graduated students know.
Mhm.
And that's where our probably big interview pool comes from. But the LinkedIn is also very valuable, and the Slack would be, I wasn't aware of that, but that would certainly be a huge place to go network and meet new people.
Yeah, that Slack is free for anyone to join. There's just an invite link on that page, and I do recommend it because there are great channels for different subject matters. I think, like Christine was mentioning, where you can just ask, and there are no foolish questions.
Right.
So, next question I have about is what is the typical application process for a position at your company? I might go to Patrick first. I know you mentioned hiring UCF students or new grads. What does that process look like?
So the thing that we've done and that has been very successful is we obviously, let the professor, I think we work with Dr. Applin, if that's the right name.
Yes, that's definitely the right name.
Yep. So we reach out to him and he spreads the word, that we're looking for people, and then we get resumes in. And then what I've been doing recently is sending out a written assignment to those people, asking them to provide me instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. which is a very common assignment, but it's very telling in what you get back and the type of writing that the people or the applicants can do or are capable of doing, and the attention to detail they put in to what they're doing. And then from there, we rank those results back and we then interview those people. And it's just kind of a process from there. But we've been very successful with that model over the last couple of years.
UCF has a great Tech Comm program with a lot of talented people, so I'm glad to hear it. I do want to give a quick shout out to Deborah, who is also a big fan of the peanut butter sandwich lesson.
Yeah, that's very familiar to me.
Back when I worked for Deborah.
Yeah, we use that in a number of trainings, especially for non-technical writer tech people. Show them how to, if they don't have a tech writer available. So I get you, Patrick. Definitely.
It's very interesting. I've got, just basic ones, numbered steps, no numbered steps, multiple steps in a sentence. The two best ones I can think of, the people actually included graphics in their procedure, labeled the graphics, figure 1, figure 2, referenced those figures in their steps. It was they top shelf people. One of them got hired, went from contractor to Lockheed employee within about 4 months. He was a very, very good writer. Is one of my great young people on my team right now.
Just to add to that, I used to use a visual demonstration in mine where I would literally bring a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and and have the person who wrote this thing come up and follow it exactly. And there's been times when you put the peanut butter on the bread, the loaf of bread. In other words, you'd set the jar on the bread loaf. Because and when you visually show that, a lot of people like eyes would just open. It was crazy. It was fun though, very fun.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting. I've also learned you can make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches lots of different ways. So it's
Oh yeah, absolutely.
true.
My husband, I strongly disagree on amount of peanut butter. I believe it should be mostly peanut butter.
So
I'm really in it for the peanut butter experience.
Mhm.
So Christine, how about at your company? What does an application process usually look like?
So the first step is to put in an application online, and myself as a hiring manager, I work with a recruiter. So they do the initial screening of anybody who's, putting in and really not qualified. So I work closely with that recruiter to tell them what exactly I'm looking for, and then they screen out any applications that don't match that. So then they give me a set of applications that they feel like are a good fit. We review them together. And then the recruiter contacts anybody that I'm interested in interviewing and does an initial phone screening, just like 30 minutes, some basic Q&A. And if the recruiter feels like they're a good fit, then they set up a time for me to interview that person. And then prior to the interview, or when the recruiter calls them to schedule the interview with me, I ask them to submit 3 writing samples that I can review before the interview. So I like to see some portfolio examples. And one tip, if you do not have writing samples and an interviewer asks for them, just make them. Document how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like I've had some people that I've really been interested in, and they've said, well, I don't have any writing samples. And that kind of, puts us dead in the water. So I had, in fact, someone on my team who is just a star on my team. She had no writing samples, and she went and documented like how to buy a gift card off Amazon. And that's what she gave me, but it was a good writing sample. So don't let that hold you up from putting in for a job and submitting writing samples. And so then we would interview, and I would, after the interview, if I felt like they were a candidate I wanted to pursue, I would ask them to stick around for 30 minutes, and I would give them a 7-page document and a red pen and ask them to mark up. I had introduced formatting errors, spelling errors, typos, and I would ask them to just mark it up and hand it in to me because I wanted to see what their editing process looks like.
Wow. Was it painful to make a bad sample?
Yeah.
I've also done that, Christine. Same thing. We got a just downloaded a common PDF off, COTS manual off the internet and introduced errors into it and did the same, have done that same exact thing.
Yeah. I mean, it shows me like attention to detail, and if they can catch the little things, like maybe some typeface is 11 point instead of just 12 point. If they can catch those things, I can tell they've got a really good eye for detail.
I think that's a superpower the best technical communicators have. They just know. You can sense it. It's like extra spaces.
Right.
Yeah.
So Wendy, I know.
Bethany?
Oh yeah,
Hey,
what's that, Deborah?
Bethany, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could
Yeah.
I ask a follow-up question to the panelists? I didn't have any moderated questions, but to what they were just talking about. you
Sure. I don't
mind?
want to go too far off. Is it on the same
No.
track?
Yeah, it's on the same track. And I
Okay.
was wondering if they, in their application process, do they make sure that the recruiter or whoever's submitting the resume does not change it?
Oh,
So if there's mistakes in the resume, do you want to see those, or do they somehow work with the applicant to make sure their resume is free of errors? I was just curious about your situation. Thank you.
Go ahead, Christine.
In my situation, the recruiter would not make any changes. They would give me the resume as it's submitted.
Yeah, same. In my current model of doing it, the resumes come directly to me from the applicants. There's no middle person. I do all that myself.
And I know our company does not offer anything to work with the candidate to correct their resume. I will say that depending on different software systems that we've had for handling applications, sometimes the uploaded resume loses all formatting. So we might sometimes just get the text of it. So that's just something to keep in mind that could happen depending on where you apply and how they handle their applications and resume submissions.
That's great. Thank you.
so Wendy, I know a bit about this agent process, which is ever evolving, but if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that and how it works now.
Right. Very similar to what Christine was saying. We work with a recruiter as well, employed by Sagent. And so they will handle the job posting and review applications and try to narrow down the pool to candidates who are more in line with what we're looking for. And so then the recruiter will forward or share resumes with me or the hiring manager. And then I go through and look for more refinements to find someone who really fits with what we're looking for. And then I will do an interview. I also then have other members of my team conduct a second interview if I feel that the person is a potential hire. So the purpose of that is just to get a little more detail about the person, but mostly to ensure that that individual would be a good fit personality wise, just to interact and work with the team. So I think that's a very important aspect as part of the hiring process too. So we end up with a couple rounds of interviews.
All right. Thanks, Wendy. I do see some questions in the chat. I am grabbing those and putting them aside, and I will come back to them. So don't worry about them being not noticed. My next question is, what are some of the main traits or skills you're looking for? I would say beyond obvious, can you write? Can you edit? Are there specific things for what you do that you're looking for? I know we kind of addressed some of this with writing samples. Can you write procedures with detail? Yes. But if there's anything else, maybe, I don't know, personality wise or background that you'd like?
I always try to find out how they work with subject matter experts.
Mm-hmm.
How do they research and dig in and find out information? If at our company, our writers often work with some source material, maybe specs, but that doesn't always provide everything that we need. So I try to find out from the candidates, how do you go about researching and obtaining the information? Because it might not always just be handed over. over to a person. So those are a couple points that I put in
Yeah,
my search.
Yeah, I typically ask those type of questions during an interview also. But then, looking for initiative, self-starters, those kind of things that when you can, or try to, get the interviewees to talk about stuff like that where they might share information.
Yeah.
I also try to find out about how they handle multiple responsibilities or multiple assignments that might all need to be happening in the similar time frame. So that's a reality of our workplace. There's never just one kind of linear project. There's many, many things to be working on, several priorities. So I try to get a sense of their ability to handle multiple things at any given time.
Yeah. Christine, did you have something to add?
Yeah, kind of along the lines of what Wendy and Patrick said. A lot of my interview questions are like, tell me about a time when you, say, had multiple projects due the same week. How did you handle that? How did you balance that? Because I'm trying to get insight into how they approach projects. One thing that I think sometimes in Tech Comm people get hung up on is the tools. Like, if I don't know how to use Madcap Flare, can I get a job? And for me personally, I can teach anybody how to use Madcap Flare. But it's much harder for me to teach you how to troubleshoot or work well with others or be a good writer. So I just want to throw that out there because I think sometimes people worry too much about not knowing a specific program, and you can learn that. It's the other skills that are, and yeah, like Anne Marie said in the chat too, soft skills. Those are more important and they're a lot harder to teach somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
that is a great point. And I echo that because I know we often look for specific software skills, but if I see a candidate that's learned something similar, I just note that they have learned that. So I feel like, okay, if they're learning that, then they're going to learn the things we need them to use. So just that ability to learn covers a lot of things.
Yeah. So I guess we've kind of been talking about different things you've encountered in the hiring process. My question is, have you ever been presented with a resume or an interview that really stood out? What made it memorable? I will accept positive or negative experiences. Either what to do or what not to do.
What to do is make sure that you read the job posting and make sure that you have specifics in your resume or cover letter for everything that's is included in the job posting, just to make that's a box you can check. Yes, the person meets all these basic things. Then you can move on to maybe getting an interview or making it to the next step. So step one is making sure that your resume cover letter hits all those basic requirements in the job posting.
Right.
I think that's really important for like bigger companies like mine that we use recruiters, because a recruiter might work with hiring managers across the company, across all kinds of departments. And so when I tell them I need someone who can troubleshoot or multitask, they're looking for those keywords in an application. They might not understand exactly what a tech writer does as a recruiter, but if you can demonstrate that you meet the requirements of the job posting, it shows the recruiter that's what they're looking for.
Well, and I have just been going through interviews with various candidates. So one person I just spoke to just really had very little to say, which was just so unfortunate because there were so many things on that person's resume that really I felt fit in with what we were looking for, but she just really had very very little to say in response to any questions. So I would just encourage candidates to, feel that you can elaborate, explain yourself, give, give a full answer. Um, Not that you should talk too much, but don't cut yourself short.
Yeah. It actually kind of leads right into my next question was, I know many interviewers ask, what questions do you have for me? Or do you have any questions for me? Which I think for a lot of people who haven't done interviewing sometimes get stymied by that question if they're not prepared. What kind of questions do you think people who are interviewing should ask their interviewer?
Well, sorry to
No, go ahead, Wendy.
jump in.
Okay.
One person asked me recently, what's your onboarding process? How do you, bring the new person on to help them be successful? And I thought that was a great question for a candidate to ask.
Another good one, tell me about the team I would be working with, or what would my normal everyday job duties be? Am I, in that position? Would be another good question.
I had someone ask me one time, what's something new that I could expect to learn in my first 90 days? And I thought that was a cool question to ask, because it showed that they knew they were going to learn new things from this job, and they were interested to know that. I would say these are all really good questions that Wendy and Patrick have shared, but do ask questions, because if I ask someone, do you have any questions for me? And they say no, I'm like, really? You don't have anything? You don't want to know anything about the company or the benefits or what your day-to-day job would be like? So do ask questions, because it shows that you're interested and you're really thinking about this position.
Right. I know I've had several questions recently where our company is a software company. We work with developers and business analysts. So I know I've had some candidates ask me, well, how many developers are you supporting? Or how, what's the ratio of tech writer to developer or business analyst? And so I think that's a valuable question, so they can try to understand the workload.
Yeah, thank you. Those are all great questions. And the biggest thing being ask a question. Nothing wrong with preparing your questions right ahead of time if you're worried about being put on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. You can even write them down. I've seen people do that. They, that even shows more preparedness, that they actually thought about it in advance and have written questions at the interview.
Yeah, right.
All right. Great point. All right. So my last prepared question before we get to some of these ones I've noted from the chat are, how do you see this field, meaning technical communication in general, changing in the future? You can address short term. You don't have to tell me what it's going to be like in 100 years. Don't worry.
I would say for my team, we are getting much more involved in UI UX, so user interface, user experience, customer experience. I think it used to be thought of as technical writers were just writers, and they just documented, in my situation, documenting software. But they're starting to see the value of our writers, since they are in the software on every page, clicking every button. They have really good feedback of how the software functions. And so we are getting pulled into more like, help us assess this new UI and what should we change? What can we make better? Or we're revamping a product. What are the sticking points in our current UI that we could make better with the new design? And so I think that's a really exciting area for technical writers to start to get involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Agree with that.
Yeah, and ours, we have a big shift moving to Agile, where the writers are actually getting embedded with the Agile teams and trying to influence that. So that's probably something to definitely learn or be aware of as writing goes forward, because it's absolutely the way if you're interested in DoD, that's like the whole DoD is moving to Agile for hardware, software. So it's important to understand that process.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely understanding the Agile process. And I think as far as our team goes, beyond writing is just what's the most effective way to present information. And so our team is very involved in that aspect. How do we make the material that we're writing most useful? So it's kind of designing information and architecting that information and publishing it too. So there's a lot of related roles there and lots of opportunity, I think, in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll check back in a few years and see if these predictions were accurate. For those who might have heard the word Agile, I did just put a link to a site I found to be useful that gives some definitions on Agile, Scrum, and so they don't just sound like words that have no meaning out of context. Because I know if you haven't worked with a company that has done Agile, it might be a foreign concept. So I do recommend familiarizing yourself with that, even if it's not something you've done. So I think we're going to move on to what your questions are. I'm going to start with some of the ones from the chat. Feel free to put more in. And if we get through all those, then I'll open it up wider to see if people have other questions. So we had a question from Joanna, I believe, about hiring managers and portfolios. Do you prefer electronic samples, or would you like to look at a portfolio site if you were to review someone's writing samples?
I would prefer electronic. A lot of time the portfolio sites are blocked from from Lockheed's firewall. I've had that before where I couldn't get to them. So
Lockheed does not mess around, I have heard.
Yeah. Either is fine. I'm really open to both ways of accessing the information.
Yeah, I would say either, but Patrick makes a really good point. You don't know who you're sending them to, what their company restricts. So might be safe to do both, maybe.
That's true.
All right. I will say, Wendy, one of the people we interviewed last year had writing samples that were from the late 90s.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
And I will forever remember those because I was like, I was in 4th grade when this was written.
Right. Well, and one of the more memorable samples, I will just say, just to jump back to the peanut butter jelly, it was not something we were requested, but that was one of the more memorable samples we got. So unsolicited, it really stood out because it was well done. So
Yeah, it's always good to have your work out there. I know Deborah put a question here about addressing your perspective on ageism in the hiring process. So I think that's sort of a broad discussion topic more than a specific question, unless there's something you'd like to add to refine that question, Deborah.
No, just if you find it difficult, or you guys sound like when you interviewed, you don't really take that into consideration. I know I've been finding a lot of issues lately with getting people trying to find out how old people are in slightly different ways so they don't get caught. And I don't know, I seem to find that a lot in the industry today that are hiring for technical writers. They want young people, a lot more younger than, and I have a lot of years of experience in a lot of things like that. And I've gone from management to regular writing, and then even to be the head of content for a company. And, it's just interesting when trying to look for a job. I just wondered if you had any thoughts or experiences or anything like that, because I know we're talking to students, but it's, you have the other end of the spectrum.
I know I personally, sorry. Wendy,
no, go ahead.
I don't, I look for the best person, whatever, if you have the best peanut butter and jelly instructions, you're going to be the one I'm talking to. I don't, that two-page thing doesn't have any indication of age. So best person is who I'm, looking for, who can get along best with anyone. Those soft skills that were mentioned earlier, and the ability, to interview people and write good content is, I think, what should be. After that's how I operate.
Yeah,
Nice to hear.
I agree. Yeah, I just want the best person with the most applicable experience. So I know in our recent pool of candidates, I've had several people with many years of experience, and those have been great candidates to talk with.
Yeah, it's like Christine, you were echoing that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm usually hiring entry level. And so if someone applies and they've got like 30 years experience, I'm thinking the salary range we have for an entry level person is probably not going to fit someone who has decades of experience in the field. I'll still interview them if I feel like they would be a good fit for it because they did apply. But I wonder if maybe sometimes that happens, like, salary range and years of experience that they're looking for could affect that. But like Patrick and Wendy said, I just want the best person for the job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that. I saw we had a question from Anne Marie about what would you bring to the summit. I think that was sort of along with the questions about portfolios and such things. So for those who have been, that's, the STC conference every year. I remember the first year I went, I didn't have business cards and everyone else had business cards, but that was years ago. I don't know if people still do that. Any thoughts about what would be useful to have at a conference? I guess for job seekers.
I mean, a business card, if you had it, or I don't know, maybe the more modern version would be, let me email you. Can I get your email address and let me email you my resume, or ask them for their card and shoot them a follow-up email.
Right.
I think that the strong thing that you're going to see from Summit is the networking opportunity. So like if you meet someone there, make note of their name and then send them a LinkedIn request afterwards. Or, if you have a good conversation, say, hey, I'm really interested to learn more. Can we meet sometime and do like a 30-minute chat or something?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So another question we have is about the interview. Do you have structured questions or is your interview more like a conversation? I'm going to go to Wendy first because I know how you do interviews.
Well, for myself, I do have just a standard set of questions that I just have on my screen, because I try to be very consistent so that I'm talking about the same things candidate to candidate, so I can evaluate people consistently, but I really try to make it more of a conversation. So I like to try to get a sense of the person. I'm not really trying to put people on the spot or make them feel uncomfortable. I want to get a sense of who they are, how they work, are they going to fit in with the team? So definitely for me, it's more of a conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, I kind of follow the same model that Wendy just described, structured questions so that it provides some consistency, but then at the same time, try and make it a conversation to try and draw the person into, so you only get to talk to them for, 30 to 40 minutes. So you want to get them talking as much as possible.
Make it sound a little bit like an interrogation. You want to get them talking. You want to hear what they have to say.
Exactly.
Right.
Christine?
My company has undertaken several efforts to remove bias from the hiring process. And so one of the things that they've encouraged us to do is use the same set of questions with every person you interview. So you're asking the same things across the board. And that helps eliminate bias because you're not going down a different conversation path with somebody else. But like Patrick and Wendy, I try to keep it conversational or casual feeling. I know people are always nervous coming into an interview, but I want them to be comfortable talking. And so same questions, but try to make them feel as comfortable as they can.
So it sounds like it's a little bit of both for everybody. Thank you for answering that one. We did have another question from Anne Marie about what do you recommend to a caregiver returning to a career after taking time off to raise a family, having done some gigs while staying at home. So transitioning back into the workforce.
That's a good question.
It's good to be here. Good to be at STC meetings.
Yeah.
Maybe, definitely demonstrate the ability to learn new things and show that you're on top of, whatever area of technical writing you're looking to get into, that you've done research in that area and you understand what's modern or current in that field. Obviously, you don't need to learn the specific software for that company, but just demonstrate that you can, learn things or learn new tools, I would think.
Emery says that is why she's here. Christine, what'd you have?
I just wanted to mention my company has what they call a returnship, and we specifically target people who have been out of the workplace for a while, several years. And it's kind of like a combination of a career / internship. Your first 6 to 12 months is more like you're getting heavily mentored and coached, and then after that, the expectation is that you would get a full-time job with the company. I do think that it's becoming more common for those kinds of situations. Like as a whole, our workforce has become much more accepting of, we understood you took 10 years off of work to care for an elderly parent or a child or whatever you had going on. So Watch for those return ships.
Yeah.
They're a good opportunity.
Lockheed has a similar program to that. I'm not very familiar with it, but I have seen people in that kind of career track where they are getting mentored, just like Christine was describing. So it's definitely out there in those companies, so or larger companies. So make sure to look for things like that.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah, I would just say, focus on your skills and what you have to offer, how you can benefit a company. I think it's certainly, we've certainly all seen candidates who have had maybe gaps in their work timeline, and I don't worry about that as long as I see good experience and like you were saying, Patrick, just learning new skills and that kind of thing. So I just focus on your skills and abilities.
Right, great. I think that's all the questions I saw in the chat so far. I hope I did not miss any. Anyone have a question you would like to ask? Otherwise, I will keep asking questions for the rest of the time. You're welcome to either put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask your question aloud.
I have one, Deborah.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Do you find, like on some of the interviews that I've gone on, that a lot of my samples were done in a virtual system, such as a content management system, or in some way that you really can't get a sample of it? Do you recommend? I've done things where I've taken company samples and removed all of the proprietary stuff. Is that something that you would look at, or how do you deal with samples, or if someone's working in a content management system?
Well, I know I have run into that where folks have had writing samples where it is proprietary. So yeah, they've just blocked out, and that's fine to me because well, in the cases I've seen, because I'm able to get enough sense of the rest of the material and their writing ability. Whether it comes from a content management system or not, I don't think. So are you talking about formatting and appearance of the document? Is that what you're getting
Yeah,
at?
just the inability to print it or create it in a virtual form. In other words, you can't like print it out from the content management system where it's in like a knowledge center or your knowledge base entries or something like that, if that's what your writing is. So the best thing, I guess, is what you're saying is just to create something on your own.
Yeah, I don't try to worry too much about the format or the look, because I know a lot of that can be dictated by the company or by the job that the person's had. So a lot of those decisions may not have been made by the writer. So I really try to focus on the content and the writing ability. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. I did see Laurie joined, the other Laurie. Hi, Laurie Meyer. Thanks for joining us. The other Laurie is on as well, so we have a wealth of Lauries. So any other questions? If not, I've got one I can ask.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Laurie. Glad you're here. Join us from the West Coast.
Oh, I know.
Well, we're glad you could make it. All
Thank
right. So I guess I'll ask a question because I don't see any yet. We've talked a little bit about resumes, having keywords in there. Is there anything that's a deal breaker in a resume aside from not matching the exact experience that you would see that would be a turnoff for you?
Oops.
Poor formatting, poor, like if it's not consistent, if there's lots of grammatical error, any grammatical errors or any misuse of punctuation or thing, you're applying to be a technical writer, your resume should be error free. And I often see resumes that are not error free. So it's just an attention to detail thing. If you can't make your own resume good, what are you going to kind of work you're going to do when you're working for a company?
True. Yeah.
Same.
Me too. Spelling errors really jump out at me on a resume.
Yeah, I know when we've had Jack Molisani on, he has said, check your dashes to see if you have a weird mixture of N dashes and M dashes, because often you don't notice, but everyone else does.
Yep. We actually did that in our PDF error document that we made. We mixed in M's and M dashes.
Ooh, that's
Just to see if-
that's subtle.
Yeah, we wanted to see if people found it, would find them.
Yeah. Still keep an eye on the chat. If there's any questions, feel free to ask anything, or follow up on something that we've already asked our panelists. If not, I do have other questions. Not seeing any yet, so I'll go on to my next one. Something that we're really passionate about in the chapter is mentoring. A lot of the people are here that have been mentors or mentees as students, and I know that that's something I came into STC through and has been essential to my experience as a technical communicator. Do you see as a hiring manager that you have a mentoring role with anyone you're hiring or something like that?
Yeah, I'm usually hiring for entry level writers, so I know that part of that is that, you know, I'm getting someone straight out of college or new to the field, and so I know that part of it's going to be me mentoring them and showing them the ropes. So that's just part of my expectation.
Yeah, same. Especially with the target audience or model that I've been hiring people the last 2 or 3 years. They're either they just graduated or they're in their final semester. And I actually look forward to that part of it, you know, the mentoring, the teaching part, and helping people grow I find that very fulfilling.
We're often, or well, not, we don't hire very often on my team, but
That's because
when-
we stay forever.
right. So we're typically looking for someone with experience, but there's so much to learn about our company and our software. So the mentoring is about learning, you know, our tools and our software, our products. So we try to have a very well-developed onboarding plan for within our team, not just separate from the company's onboarding. So we really do try to acclimate a new hire to the team, our practices, our standards, and then to keep teaching them what they need to know to be successful. So that's definitely part of the role.
So we actually have a related question from Joanna. Would adding mentoring experience on a resume be an advantage? Is that something you would like to see for a new hire? I assume that's experience being mentored, Joanna, or do you mean doing mentoring? I realize that could be either way.
No, that's thank you for asking me to clarify that. I'm actually currently in a mentoring program through FTC with a wonderful person who's a madcap flare expert. So it's been a very rewarding experience getting to learn what she knows. And certainly those skills would transfer over into a full-time job or what have you. So mentioning that, would that be an advantage to know that, does it say anything about you being able to work with people or the fact that you're learning new skills? Would that stand out to you on a resume?
I would say yes. Yeah, absolutely. For the reasons you just mentioned, the ability to work with other people, you're learning new tools. A lot of times on a resume, you just see, I know mad flare is listed, but there's no where did you use it or how, you know, what's your experience with that? So that would certainly provide some amplifying information on the use of that tool.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
There's a thank you from John, or I'm glad to know that your mentoring is going well, Joanna. I think you're with Diane Hogan, who's been one of our longtime mentors, and she really does know her stuff. So I'm glad it's helping you.
Yes, she's been amazing. And I think this is where you get into, because I'm a seasoned professional. I am a student, but I've been around the block. Like some people were saying earlier, they've been around the block a couple of times. I have a lot of interface with different industries, which gives me advantage here and there. And I am gainfully employed, but sometimes you're looking at, the bigger picture, and having someone like Diane in your back pocket really gives you that outside of the box experience that you don't have, especially for me, being a transitional person, don't have that insight. She's been in it for eons and basically can share all the different things that she's done, as well as give me pointers, which has been the most valuable information of things that the industry expects and they don't teach you in school. So that really becomes paramount when you're going after some of the positions that are out there. You know, and Patrick, I'm going to point out one because it's had to do with Lockheed Martin. It was last semester. I came to know about the association that UCF has with your company. And when I saw the job op, I was afraid. I didn't even want to apply because I thought, oh my God, you know, the school hasn't even, told us about any of these programs. I have no idea what they're talking about. RoboHelp was one of them. And I said, I would be, not even know what they're talking about. And then when I got onto this team with Diane, it really was an eye opener. She really introduced me to things that I had no idea. And so that is also a, kudos to STC and FTC, because without this kind of relationship, students like us don't have exposure to those programs or know what the industry is expecting. So it's been a win-win.
I'm really glad to hear that. Mentoring has been so central to what's made our chapter a success. It's why some of us are here, like myself. I accidentally ended up getting mentored by sitting next to Dan Voss, and he said, do you want to do a mentoring program? And I said, yes, having no idea what I was agreeing to. And here I am years later. So I'm really glad that's been essential to you. And I do see a comment from Anne-Marie, there's a disconnect between what colleges teach and what companies expect. In some sense, yes, that's why we're really glad to provide, professionals who know what it's like, especially working for big corporations, and what those expectations are. I think there's a lot of value in what UCF teaches from the things you're not going to learn on the job, like how to write and how to think like a technical communicator, because no company wants to teach you that. But it's definitely true. You do not learn all of the applications. So it's hard sometimes when they want you to learn an application that is cheap for a company to buy, but very expensive for you as an individual to have ever owned or used. So it's definitely great to have that partnership. And from the mentoring side, we like sharing what we know, good and bad. John has been sticking with me for a while as my mentee, and he has learned a lot from do not do as I do, John. learn from my mistakes.
John's another fabulous individual to know, because he's like Laurie, he knows everybody. So I've had the pleasure of working with John. So I know, he's got his hand in just about everything, and he's great at what he does. So that's a great connection to have as well. Shout
out to John Clement. We're going to make you embarrassed, John, by talking about how great you are.
And shout out to you, Bethany, for your great mentoring too.
For those who don't know, John joined the chapter because I sort of kidnapped him one day after running into him on campus. And I said, hey, you were in a class where I talked about STC and Tech Comm. I'm going to an STC meeting right now. Come with me. And rushed him into my car and took him to an STC Florida chapter meeting. And then Stockholm Syndrome set in, and John is still here years later. So I don't see any other questions yet. Anything else that anyone would like to unmute and ask? Or even a perspective to add? Well, I do have another question then. I know we asked you all a little bit about your general experience, but I'd love to hear about what your first job was like in Tech Comm. So where'd you start? I know we've heard a little bit, but kind of what that work was like, because I know there have been changes in recent years, but you certainly have built on it. Everyone's casting their minds back.
Well, I know I didn't have education as a technical writer. I went to school with an English major. So I just kind of learned on the job, and found that was kind of the thing for me. So I just really got involved in writing about a software system and getting into that product, learning it, and just documenting how to use it. And so it just took off from there.
Yeah, that's great, Wendy. Patrick?
My first, so what was it? My first job I guess my first job was using technical communication products, maintaining the radar system in the background. So I learned the importance of a well-written document. And then from there, which is made by Lockheed. Then from there, I went to work at Lockheed, and also, learned the value of updating, keeping that documentation accurate. And then, I had the opportunity to probably get get different jobs within the logistics elements. There's 14 of those, but I wanted to be involved in technical publications, because when you our customers buy something, at the end of the day, they wind up with two things, pretty much is what I tell everyone on my team. They wind up with the product that they bought and a book or book set that tells them how to use it and maintain it. So it's paramount, it's paramount that that book or book set, some of our books are, 30,000 pages, and our other, I mentioned I'm part of a bigger team. One of our other business areas, they write the manuals for Black Hawk helicopters, CH-50, helicopters. So they're teaching, they're telling people how to fly. There's nothing more important than having a manual that tells someone how to accurately maintain or operate a helicopter, or someone, or jets that we make out in Texas and various other locations. So that was my first experience and kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through that. Much higher stakes than any of the writing I have done.
Right.
Christine, did you have a bit you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I, like Wendy, also did my undergrad in English with an emphasis in literature. Found that it was hard to convince anybody to hire me as a tech writer with that degree. So I went back to graduate school to do my master's in Tech Comm. At the same time, got hired on by the city, just like a secretary job. I thought this is just going to get me through grad school. Well, the city that hired me uses the software that I now document. So when I was close to graduating with my master's degree, I went to them and said, hey, I've got 4 years of experience with your software. I know how to use it. I know the ins and outs. I could come on and hit the ground running, being able to document it if you hire me. And they did. So that was almost 11 years ago.
Did they have an open position, or you were like, I'm just going to cold call them and just go for it?
Kind of a cold call. So I had gotten to know their staff over the years. They're headquartered where I lived, where I worked for the city. And so I would go to trainings and got to know their staff. So like I kind of knew them, but I basically just like hit them out of the blue one day, like, hey, I'm about to graduate and I need a job.
Wonderful. Good for you.
Worked out really well.
So there's a lesson in just putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
All right. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask questions. That's why I keep circling back. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Is there anything anyone else would like to ask at the moment of our outstanding panelists? I'm not seeing anything at the moment, but I'm happy to keep talking with you guys and seeing if there's, we have a question. Who is going to Summit? Well, I know John's going and Anne-Marie's going. Is there anyone else on the call who's going to the STC Summit in Rosemont this year? Looks like that might be all this time. I definitely hope to go next year. It's always a wonderful experience. And for those who it's your first time, it will go fast. Just try to absorb everything like a sponge and take notes, lots of notes. Also, don't be surprised if you lose your voice a few days in, because that has always happened to me because I'm not used to talking for like 15 hours a day. Christine is nodding, similar Summit experiences. Do you have any other Summit advice?
So going back to the very beginning of our call, I'm an introvert, like some of you on the call. And so it can be scary to put yourself out there and just like walk up to someone at a conference and start talking. And but it's worth it, and you'll make great connections if you put forth that effort. So try to network as much as you can and talk for 15 hours. It will pay off with the connections that you'll make.
Yeah, thank you. Deborah says, bring printed sticker with your contact info. I assume that's just not to stick to people, but to just have generally available, Deborah.
Like as they're walking down the hall.
Yeah, a lot of presenters say, if you want more information, give me your contact information. And it's easier to just peel off a sticker and put it on their list. And they came in really helpful. A lot of people did that when I was at the summits.
Gotcha. Thank you, Deborah. Well, I will go on to another question because we still have a bit more time, go until 8:30. I know right now we've had a lot of shift in the workforce from being in offices to working remote. That's what we were chatting about before the meeting started, both the pros and cons. I'm mostly seeing pros, Laurie sees cons, but that's our introvert extrovert dichotomy there at work. So how do you feel about hiring people who work in other states or in other time zones if you're going to be hiring a remote team?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, before COVID, I would have been absolutely vehemently opposed to that. But over the last 2 years, I've done a 180, and I currently have, so my team is in Orlando, based there, but I have a person that works in Texas and another person that works for me in Washington State. So 3 hours behind us, but she gets up every morning at the same time. So she's at work, I guess, 4 a.m.
Wow.
Pacific Standard Time, works the same hours we do. She just volunteered to do that. And then even as a remote or product of that, I was able to move from Orlando to Chattanooga. And so I managed my team from 500 miles away. So I'm 100% on board with some level of remote. We still need people to go on the site and, see the equipment, make the deliveries. So we couldn't have 100% remote, but there's certainly some mix of, where people can absolutely be in other states, other time zones.
I'm very glad to hear it that you're converted.
I'm absolutely 110% converted. Yep.
Yeah, that's been one of the silver linings to come out of COVID. Is prior to this, I would have been open to having someone in another time zone or another state, but my company was not. They were like, there's no way that will work out. You can't hire anybody unless they're local. But of course, COVID changed all that. And now, like Patrick, I've got people all over the US on my team, and it's worked out really well for us.
Wendy was a little ahead of the COVID remote work. How are you feeling about it, Wendy?
Right. Well, things in our company have just changed so much anyway, and we've long had remote people doing various roles. So at one time, my whole team was in our location in South Bend, Indiana, but as things changed, we began hiring in other locations or remote. And so now really our whole team is remote, and it works great. I mean, I think we'd all enjoy seeing each other in person, but as far as work, it's great, and we all have a great relationship on our team. We find ways to connect. So yeah, I think it's definitely very workable. It's been a success on our team.
Yeah, we play our favorite game. What's your weather like? Is it better or worse than mine?
Yeah.
Pretty much every time everyone's on. We do have a question from Joanna. Is the tech comm industry seeing the future remaining in remote work? So I guess the question is this going to continue, I think, beyond our current pandemic experiences? Is that what you're kind of looking for, Joanna? She's nodding. Yes. What do you think about the future in remote work?
I think in my small world, of 140 people, I have support from my, 2 levels above me, that they don't care where you're working as long as you're working, getting the job done, and doing what you're supposed to do. They don't care where you're doing it at. So I hope it stays that way, because I've pretty much bought into it 110% and moved 500 miles away. So it would be a big problem. It would be a big problem for me.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it seems like this is at least the way it's going today, and I can't really imagine it reverting to being in the office full time.
Yeah, Christine, sounds like you were a believer before the changes came, but thoughts about the future?
Yeah, I agree. I think that we will see more remote work or perhaps hybrid. My company, they started the return to office discussions actually just this month. And I told them, if we make our documentation team return full-time to the office, they are going to go find jobs somewhere else. Like, it's just, there's so many other companies out there that are offering either remote or hybrid. And so I was able to make the case for my team to stay hybrid. So the expectation is we'll go in like once a month, do a team meeting, get lunch together. But other than that, remain largely remote. And I just think with the way the job market is right now, it's a job lookers market. There are so many companies trying to fill positions that they can't fill. So that just, people want that greater flexibility. It's going to be part of the future.
It's certainly something I am very attached to. What would my cats do if I was gone all day? Yeah, Joanna commented, there's no reason for tech writers to be in person. I think the exception is people who are working on hardware, but even then they don't need to be in person all the time.
Yeah, that's exactly the case with my team. There's hardware that we write about a lot of the time. So the hardware, we go in and grab pictures, grab information, and they, go back and work remote. But there is certainly, if there's hardware involved, like you were saying, Bethany.
That's why I like working in software and I'm here to stay.
Yeah.
Deborah, I saw you unmuted. Do you have a question?
Well, yeah, I was going to type it in. Sorry. I was going to ask Patrick. I was curious, with your hardware, do you have illustrators that
Yes.
do the illustrate? Yeah, I was just curious how the tech writers work real close with the illustrators.
So in, our bigger pool of the 140, we have at one of our other sites, we have just a dedicated team of 20 and they do illustrations. My team of 20, we do our own illustrations. So they, grab the pictures, they do all the stuff in Illustrator or Photoshop to get the images that we need for our manuals.
Cool. Thank you.
Good question. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions yet. So I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. When you're looking for candidates, can they manage their time? Do they know how to juggle a lot of projects or products or changing timelines? How do you really suss out if you think someone's going to be able to handle the workload or the particular questions you ask or just responses you're looking for?
And kind of like Wendy mentioned earlier, I that's one of my stock questions is, can you tell me about a time when you had to, and, do several things at once or challenging deadlines or whatever, there's a few end question or end parts to that question, but then you just ask for examples of when you had to do this and you kind of gauge the responses that you get.
Okay, so you're looking for concrete examples and follow up on specifics.
Yes.
Along those lines, one question that I like to ask is, tell me about a time that you had a deadline coming up or maybe even multiple deadlines coming up and you realized you were not going to make it. What did you do? And it's really telling because I've had answers like, I just worked 15-hour days and didn't ask anybody for help or anything. And I just busted it out on my own. And that tells me, okay, you're not the kind of person that goes to your manager and says, hey, I'm kind of stuck, I need help. Or like someone mentioned in the chat, delegating. So, or I've had others say, I went to my manager and said, hey, can I get some help? Or how can we shuffle some of this around? So that's a really good question for me to ask because I like to know, like when you're in a jam, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good way of getting right to the heart of things.
Right. Yeah. Just getting them to give those examples. That's the main thing. Just getting people talking, learning how they work, how they approach things. That's how I gauge it.
So Christine was saying not asking for help. Anything else that would be a red flag or something that would be a concern for a response? Or you'll know when you hear it. Well, we do have another question from Deborah. As managers, what is your criteria for evaluating your writers on the job? Deborah, is this like in regard to performance reviews or just sort of generally assessing how people are doing? Sorry, you're welcome to type a response. I realized that's the follow-up question to your question. Yes. To the former or the latter? I'm sorry, I asked a two-part question. That's on me.
Yeah, no, I was just curious how they as managers, what is your evaluation process like? Or, I've always found it at different managerial positions that I've had, what the company expects me to evaluate people on the job, especially, when they're senior or they're junior or any of the levels. What do you look for, or what is usually your go-to criteria for evaluating your staff?
Well, at our company, in theory, we set goals for each person across all the positions in the company. So our ratings are tied to how the individual approaches and performs against those goals. Did they fulfill it? Did they or did they not?
Mhm.
So so that's our standard practice for doing that. But I mean, certainly throughout the year, you know, I I've meet frequently with the individuals on my team just to see how they're doing and performing, and you know, certainly trying to help and support them along the way. So it's not just maybe not just a year-end evaluation, or just kind of ongoing. I think you just kind of see how people are working and how they handle things. So that all goes into the formal evaluation later, but you know, during the year, I think we all kind of have those little spots where we're assessing.
I'm seeing nodding from Christine and Patrick. Similar experiences for you both?
Yes. Yeah, we have you know, goal setting, and then you know, monthly or, you know, more frequent check-ins that support the, you know, annual type write-up, and then the evaluations are based on that. But then, you know, beyond that, it's looking for, you know, the people that are doing the extra, or, you know, taking that initiative, and you know, if they're tasked to do A, B, and C, but they do A, B, C, and D, and then write down how they did those things so that somebody else can, you know, follow along and use those instructions. You know, it's just the people that do the extra are always going to stand out a little bit above the people that just do enough to get by.
That working 15-hour days without asking for help, right? That's the other key.
No, that's not the right. No, I'd rather have somebody ask for help, like Christine was saying.
Yeah. for sure.
Christine, similar experience for you?
Yeah. What Patrick and Wendy said is exactly what I do. So nothing really to add there.
I will say, for people who have not been in like a significant corporate job yet and haven't done like performance reviews or goal setting, please learn from my mistake the first year, which was I didn't write anything down that I did. And at the end of the year, had to reconstruct an entire year's worth of performance. So take notes on what
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah, a great way to do that is using OneNote. You know, you could just create a different page for every month and jot down what you're doing in that month as you go along. It's a
Yeah, it's
trick
great
I've learned.
advice. Yeah, Emery
Well,
says
I-
document. It's
Right.
like,
Well, and I always think that at the annual review time, that's a great time to really highlight yourself, you know,
Mhm.
and reinforce all the good things you've done. So that it's just a more formal way, you know. Of course, you're always interacting with your team and your managers, and they should know what you're doing, but that just formalizes it a bit more.
yeah. Emery says walk into the evaluation knowing what the outcome is. Yes, we like that level of like confidence and assuredness in what we're doing. So I guess I'm given another opportunity. Sorry for any other questions. I know there's some folks who I haven't heard from yet. You are not obligated to ask a question, even though I know we talked earlier that you should always have questions, but this is not an interview. Don't worry. I do think it's great that a lot of technical communicators are naturally curious, and that really serves us well in the workplace. Amory says, how would you address salary questions? Well, that's a broad can of worms to open, but I think it's good to bring up with our hiring managers. Or should you even ask about salary? Great question. I guess that's a good question for our managers. Do you think it's appropriate for people to ask about salary? At what point and when? How does that work with your company?
Well, it's something that the recruiter in our company, that the recruiter would talk with the candidate about. So the hiring manager is not involved in that part of the conversation.
Same at Lockheed.
Yeah, that's one of the, I mentioned the recruiter calls anybody that I'm interested in and does a 30-minute screening. Their salary requirements is one of the things that the recruiter asks them about, because if they're way out of range, we wouldn't bring them in for an interview.
For those of you who are STC members, I do recommend, if you're just getting the field and you don't have really a reference point for salary, do look at the STC salary database that's available to you as a member. You should have got an email about that as a member, but if not, I know you can find it on the STC website, or I can send you a link. That's really helpful when you're just starting out to have a frame of reference for what ranges are like.
I want to add that that is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so STC doesn't do it. It's from the government.
Correct. We do have a question about how long is the average interview process? I assume that's referring to the end-to-end application to hiring process rather than the timeline of an interview. Yes.
I would say a couple months, and is probably a good number that I've in my experience.
Good round average, knowing that it can vary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 months ish.
Yeah, I agree. It takes a little longer than you might expect because, you know, there's time spent kind of sorting through resumes, and then, you know, different people have different schedules. So that can kind of draw out when you're able to schedule the interviews, and people might be on vacation. So that sounds kind of silly, but you know, all that really is part of the workplace. And it does, I think it does kind of draw it out sometimes. So sometimes it maybe takes a little longer than we'd like.
Just hope the hiring manager isn't going out on medical leave after the job posting is posted.
Oh, have you heard of that happening?
They happened to me.
Oh no. So you were
yeah.
just left hanging?
Well, yeah, luckily it was within Lockheed, but the hiring manager went out for knee replacement in the middle of the job getting posted before any interviews could get done. So there was like a 45-day, 2-month gap between like when the job was actually posted to when any interviews were done. And then it was, you know, and probably another few weeks after that for it all to get wrapped up, but certainly took longer than it, like, you know, normal, but
yeah,
things do happen, like Wendy was saying.
Right.
Christine, anything to add about a similar timing potentially?
Yeah, I'd say 6 to 8 weeks for our company.
Yeah. Joanna says, what is a lost art is the follow-up of a thank you letter or a thank you message. I do think people still do that. I hope. Do you guys receive sometimes thank you messages from people you've interviewed?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Not necessarily a formal piece of mail.
But
no,
not everybody though, which kind of surprises me sometimes.
Yeah,
oh, not everyone does it.
No.
Right.
I would say the majority don't, and the exception do.
Right.
Yeah.
My kids don't believe in it. They think that it's crazy. I said, well, how are you going to stand out otherwise?
Yeah. I think there might be some generational expectations.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Christine.
I've had some people use that. They do an email, not a written letter, but I've had them use that as an opportunity to reiterate, you know, like, thank you for the opportunity. It was great to talk to you. To summarize what we talked about, here's my top 3 points why I think I'm a good fit for this job, or something like that. So just a plain thank you is memorable, because like others have said, it is the exception and not the norm, but it is an opportunity for you if you want to reiterate you know why you think you're a good fit. You can do that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point to mention. We are close to the time, so we could do maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I just want to give a chance in case anyone wants to unmute and ask. I know I sound like a broken record, but we're a group of introverts, so people need time. But I don't want to deny anyone the chance. All right, well then I'll ask, I guess, the last question. We've talked about a lot of different things, good and bad, that you can do when you're applying or interviewing for a position. Is there anything else you would want to add that makes a candidate really stand out to you, to think that this is a person I want to hire? Or is it more a combination of things?
I think if they can demonstrate that they've done a little bit of research on the company, they understand what we do, that shows that they've taken the initiative, and they're, rather than just looking for a job, they're interested in this company. So knowing a little bit about what we do, and then having questions for me, because that shows that you're interested in what a job here would feel like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I've had that in interviews where people don't know who or what Lockheed Martin is, which is shocking to me. It's like you're here for the interview, and it's not like it's a pretty well known company.
You're not a startup.
No, exactly. So yeah, definitely do some research about where you're going to work.
Right. Yeah, I think it's just the combination, the experience, how they interact with you during the interview, and right, showing the interest in this particular job, not just looking for a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, I don't see any further questions. So I was going to kind of wrap us up. Panelists, I'm sorry, I realized I didn't prompt you for this. If you feel comfortable sharing your contact information in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out to you about future opportunities or further questions, please share that. If you do not feel comfortable, you are not obligated. I forgot to mention that to you in my email. For those who are job seeking, feel free to put your contact information or your LinkedIn profile in the chat. I know sometimes that's a great way for those of us who are here to connect with each other. So I'm always happy to connect with people who are in STC or FTC who are looking to, just build their network. So I see those are coming in. Thank you guys for sharing those contacts. So I really appreciate our panelists taking the time out to be here tonight and to share experiences, advice, wisdom, and anecdotes. We are grateful that you are here, and taking time for us all is just something that's really meaningful and part of what, it makes it a great community to be in. I'm always happy to be part of STC. So I think we'll go ahead and close out. Unless there's anything else you guys would like to add before we wrap up. I see also things are coming in the chat, so I'm letting those come in.
Yeah, just thank you for having us. This was really enjoyable. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Wendy gets to hear about my STC involvement, but now she gets to see it.
Right.
Patrick, sorry.
No, it's a good time as always. And, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I learned you moved to Tennessee. I didn't even know.
Yeah, we've wanted to move here when we retired, but thanks to COVID, we were able to move, 5 to 10 years earlier. So
It's a beautiful area.
Nice.
yeah, we love it. Love it up here.
Yeah. Well, Christine, I won't put you on the spot. You don't have to say something unless you want to, but if you want to, you can.
Thanks for having me. It was really enjoyable. I learned good things from Patrick and Wendy, and thanks to everybody in the audience for your engagement and your good questions.
Yeah, always happy to have thoughtful participation. And don't worry, there's no end. You can't ask any questions forever. I know our panelists have shared their contacts, so you can reach out to them or anyone else who's here. I realized I said put LinkedIn's in the chat, and I did not put my own LinkedIn. So if there's anyone else who wants to add it, if you were open to being connected with. I also will say a shout out to the FTC Discord server. If you are not a part of that and you are looking to connect with other people, it's a great place to be. John has a whole channel there, I believe, John, for LinkedIn profiles. Is that correct? Yes, John says yes. Do you have the link handy for that Discord server? I also realized I shared the link to that STC Slack much earlier, and I'll put that in the chat again, just in case you're looking for other places to connect with technical communicators. All right, that's the link to the FTC Discord. It is the place to be for, I've learned, Tech Comm related memes, pictures of pets, and job and internship opportunities for students. So
all important things.
Oh, yeah, I'm always amazed. Another shout out to John for setting that up and making it a great place to share information. So I think we are all set. Any other check in the chat for anything else? I'll try to pull these together and send out the LinkedIn profiles and stuff too. So if you guys see this going fast, don't worry, I'll make sure to get it out to you. But yeah, always happy to hear from people. And I'm hoping that some of those who are looking for jobs, next time I see you, maybe people will have some good news, especially those who are currently interviewing. So I hope things will move forward productively for you. And it was great to meet some new folks. So without further ado, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thanks, Bethany.
Thank
Yeah.
you, everybody.
Good program, all.
Yeah,
Thank you,
you're
everybody.
welcome. Always enjoy it.